Ladies, gentlemen, and those with the good sense to do away with the whole notion, I welcome you to the premier audio medium for all your Fazbear entertainment needs. The Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. Note, FFPP is not responsible for any loss of appetite, disinterest, dismemberment, or other legally classified statuses. So strap in and enjoy.
Casey's still here because I'm recording these back to back. Hello everybody and welcome to the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast. I'm your host of the Toast, where I toast here to talk about Five Nights at Freddy's. Psych! You got punked. Idiot, stupid, dummy. Sorry. We're talking about indie horror in general, not just Freddy's today. We're talking about FNAF. Don't worry, we'll get there. Into the Pit came out. But I kind of wanted to take a moment and appreciate how good of a year 2024 has already been for indie horror. Indie horror is a hit or miss with the releases we get. I know a lot of people tend to only talk about the really big names in indie horror like Five Nights at Freddy's, Bendy, Poppy Playtime, Ban to an extent of at least popularity. But a lot of other games kind of get missed in the weeds that I think deserve to be shouted out as well as like fan games. Did y'all know like FNAF Too Many Nights, a fan game, came out in January? I didn't know until like a month ago, and it might be my favorite FNAF fan game. It's a roguelike FNAF game. Play it. But I feel like a lot of games don't get talked about as much as they deserve, and I'm part of this problem. For example, one of the first games I want to talk about is Shipwreck 64. It came out January 1st this year. It might be one of my favorite indie games of all time, not just indie horror. It's a brilliant game with wonderful puzzles, excellent voice acting, excellent controls that feel good to play. It's my favorite kind of ARG because it's hard and it takes a lot of time to crack, but it's not so impossible that it's banking on thousands of people all trying different combinations to get one answer. I think a good thing to juxtapose Shipwreck 64 in like ARG quality is Courage the Cowardly Dog, the game. The Courage the Cowardly Dog game, like ARG, to a point is really fun. And it's fun to like explore and test, and like there's good sound cues to help you on the right path. And then you're put into a void where there's something on the other end, and clearly there's some kind of invisible maze, but no knowable thing to do. Well, the game expected you to take the background noise, put it into a spectrograph, and the spectrograph displays the maze that you're supposed to walk on. But there's no... And like that alone is kind of cool, but that would only be player-friendly if there was any visual cross-reference. For example, if they put repeating rows of like columns that you can't stand on, but they are visually there. Now we can look at the spectrograph and like walk in between the correct columns to get to the other side. But there's not. It's just a void. So even if you knew to use the spectrograph, it's nearly impossible. It's to the point where people released a mod for this game. There's a mod for a Game Jolt, like indie game, small time ARG that's really cool, but they modded it specifically to make that one maze visible because it just wasn't fun to do. So like, I think one of the strengths of Shipwreck 64 is it never gets that unfair. It gets hard. There are points where I had to ask Squeaks DeCorge, the developer, like the head developer behind the game. I was like, hey, I'm so stumped. I spent like an hour at 2 a.m. What am I supposed to do here? And with one hint, that's all I needed. I was off to the races. And even then, I don't think you need the hints. I think you just need to take the time and figure it out. I won't spoil it if you haven't played Shipwreck 64. You really should. It's a great game. It's on Steam. But there is a moment that I think really cemented my love for the game. And I won't say exactly what it is for spoilers, but we'll say it's when, because I really don't want to spoil it, but I want to express it specifically for the people who do know. It has to do with, we'll say when you have to cross-reference codes across something else. We'll just say that. It's near the end of the game. And I hope that's enough to tell you the moment. But when that moment happened, I was blown away. And I can't wait to see what else Squeaks and the team come up with. I forget what I was talking about. Oh, right. So like, I feel like a lot of indie horror this year, because we had such bangers outside of the smaller teams, a lot of indie horror this year kind of got almost not talked about as much as I think they would like. And maybe this is what I was talking about. I'm part of the problem, admittedly, because I'm very worried if I don't cover a FNAF thing, then that video won't perform well. I kind of talked about that last week a bit. So I would have loved to make a full theory on Shipwreck 64, but I was afraid that algorithmically my video would be punished for it because my channel is so FNAF focused. I think I'm going to take the steps to avoid that moving forward, especially since FNAF is in kind of a slow place right now. Algorithmically, not like I'm not trying to sound like one of those fans like I didn't get a game every month, wah, but I just mean like search wise, the searches are a little down right now. Regardless, there's a lot of heavy hitters, and I'm going to talk about the mainline heavy hitters as well, but I want to also put a spotlight on some of the ones that aren't. So we already talked about Shipwrecked, a game that I've seen a lot of people talk about, and I'm not saying like I'm the only one who's heard of some of these. I have like Kinito Pet. Everyone knows about Kinito Pet, but I just wanted to talk about them, right? One of them was Home Safety Hotline, and I don't think like nobody knows about Home Safety Hotline, but I feel like it didn't get as much attention to it just because it released between Help Wanted 2 and Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. Same thing with Shipwreck 64. Like, I feel like it didn't get as much time in the sun because of being released between Help Wanted 2 in December and Poppy Playtime Chapter 3, I think, late January, late February, around there. But Home Safety Hotline is one of the more creative indie games I've played, like indie horror games I've played in a while. I loved the use of live action at one of the endings. I will say one of my complaints about the game is it's not very replayable because it's not randomized, but because it's not randomized, they did really tailor it to make it a wonderful experience. And as a fan of like folklore in general, I loved what the game was presenting because I do love folklore and like I'm a pagan, you know, like I love hearing about this shit. So a game with deep roots in that and the inspirations for that is so interesting to me. And the medium is fun. I'm always a big fan of that kind of a medium of solving a problem or looking for inconsistencies or connections, like Your Papers, Please, or I think this came out this year. Was it this year or last year? Because I didn't write it down because I thought it was last year, but it might have been this year. If it's this year, it definitely deserves a shout as well. It came out this year. That's Not My Neighbor. Another perfect example of like doing a task and looking for specific connections or inconsistencies. And that's another game that like it didn't get a lot of immediate spotlight because again, that first half of the year was so stacked with Help Wanted 2 and Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. Not to mention, moving on from these games, Poppy Playtime Chapter 3. I don't think I need to be the one to tell you that like, holy shit, that was a good chapter of Poppy Playtime. The puzzles were interesting. The environments were really high fidelity. The animations were wonderful. And the monsters were legitimately scary. Like, I think a good like meter to check how that chapter fared was the fact that like everyone who covered that chapter had some essence of Poppy Playtime redeemed on their like video. And I'm not a hater. I enjoy Poppy Playtime. I had some issues with chapter 1. It was mainly length, but I enjoyed chapter 2 a lot and I liked to see where it was going. And then chapter 3 blew me away. Chapter 3 was insanely good and I think earned a lot of well-deserved good faith moving forward with Poppy Playtime. And we can see that in the reaction to the Yarnaby trailer. I think there's always still going to be a lot of haters with Poppy Playtime. And like, look, you're allowed to not like something. I want to get out in front and say this here because I said it on Twitter, but I really didn't have a reason to say it on the channel until now. You're allowed to not like Poppy Playtime and you're totally allowed to like not like the Nightmare Critters designs. But I really feel like a lot of the Nightmare Critters hate was so performative. It really, I'm not to dismiss, there's rightful criticism to make of the Nightmare Critters designs, but like a lot of what I was seeing on Twitter anyway, and I'm kind of glad that I'm really not on Twitter anymore. If you want to like interact with me on social media, I'm on Blue Sky more than anything anymore. But a lot of what I was seeing on Twitter was just people overly hating these Nightmare Critters for really no reason. Their designs are on quality, some of them a little bit better, but on par with quality of the Smiling Critters. So like the amount of people who love Smiling Critters, who are then turning around and being like, oh, these Nightmare Critters suck. I'm like, okay, you want to be in the in club about how you're so cool that you hate something. Like, again, you're allowed to just not like the Nightmare Critters, and you're allowed to do whatever you want, like whatever. But I got the sense anyway that a lot of the hate for the Nightmare Critters was very performative. That's just me, I guess. No, but I'm very excited to see what Chapter 4 has in store for us. Another game that came out earlier this year, and I mentioned it earlier, Kinito Pet. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Scared is one of my favorite indie horror games of all time. And if you haven't played it yet, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's wonderful. Trigger warning on the top of suicide and suicidal imagery, because I'm Scared gets pretty dark. But I'm Scared was one of the first games I ever played that messed with your computer. Right? Like, it would make files, reopening the game would change it. It blew me away when it came out. And I think I was in like high school, middle school, maybe. And it was blowing me away with how good it was. And then Doki Doki Literature Club was realistically the next game I ever played that did something like that. And it was minor, but what it did was good, right? The whole like deleting Monica's file and stuff. That was really good. Kinito Pet takes that concept and twists out all of the juice it can and then plays with that corpse like jump rope. It plays in the space so much, right? Kinito Pet blew me away with how creative it was with fucking with you, the player, specifically. And it did things I didn't know you could do, right? The idea of like on a second playthrough, you can use a separate window and reveal things using the second window. Or there's one amazing jump scare where it pulls up your video player to pull a video. I'm like, okay, cool, awesome. It's messing with my programs. This is cool. And then for the jump scare, it clearly had an invisible window over top of your video player, because it makes it on your desktop looks like a shadow crawls out of the video player onto your screen, which is so goddamn cool. Kinito Pet just does so many really, really impressive things to mess with you, the player, that I appreciate it so much for what it is. And, you know, Kinito's cute. Here's one. I think this is genuinely one of the most underrated indie horror games this year. And it's not because it's one of the best. You know, I think it's really solid. Maybe not one of the best, but really solid. But like, nobody played or covered this game. I almost didn't hear about it until I saw Reaps play it on Twitch. Dishwashing Simulator. I'm not kidding. Dishwashing Simulator. It astounds me how creative this concept gets. It is and I'm not kidding, dishwashing based base builder tycoon horror game. The best way I can describe it is you start the game and you're in a concrete room with a pit, a sink, and a sponge. Dirty dishes fall from the ceiling. You wash them, you throw them in the pit, you get paid. And then you're told with the rest of your day, you can go find more dishes. You enter an elevator and you put into a backrooms adjacent horrorscape, trying to avoid bear traps and monsters while looking for plates. That's amazing. And like, I got the first ending within like 4 or 5 hours, and I found out, I'm like, wait, I got this ending really quickly. What else is here? There's so much else. There's like fishing and farming if you really stick to the tycoon part of the game. So there's so much I have yet to see in that game, and I want to play more of it, but I've just been so busy. If you have not played Dishwashing Simulator, play this game. It is legitimately so interesting to me, and I don't know how it's flew under so many radars. Moving on to, you know, surprises. Ban 7. I've made it no like secret that I have a bit of disdain for Ban, especially in the early days. But credit where credit is due. I played Chapter 7 on stream, and it wasn't scary, but it was fun to play. You know, it definitely felt like a lot more effort was being put in. So I will, like, if I see effort, I want to reward that. And I see that there was more effort in Ban 7. So I wish them the best moving forward. Hopefully they keep it up. But I would be remiss with not mentioning that. However, if we're talking about complete opposite side of the coin, about like, I guess, reception, Indigo Park. I don't need to be the one to tell you that Indigo Park is a banger. Similarly, I think it's fair to say that Indigo Park, for me anyway, and I go into this a bit last week, that I'm very jaded when it comes to not jaded. I'm very numb, I guess, when it comes to horror games. I'm very it doesn't affect me as much. But I don't think it's unfair to say that Indigo Park Chapter 1 isn't especially scary. For me anyway. Like, it can get, the chase scene is intense, but there was definitely I would like to see more horror in it. But let's call a spade a spade. This is a lot of the people who worked on its first project of this scale, and it is so impressive and such a good showcase of what could come with funding and more time, So I'm really, really happy with the success that Indigo Park has found. And of course, I'd be remiss to say, like, sure, it's not that scary, but the gameplay is great. The concepts are fun. The characters are great. It's so charming beyond belief. I think they really proved that to have a successful indie horror game, it is essential to have charming, likable characters, and they have a great cast of them. None more so than Rambly himself. I don't think it's a surprise that the internet latched onto Rambly so strongly. He's cute, he's fun, he's well written. The credit song is a wonderful touch, So when I play Indigo Park Chapter 1, I might not be scared, but I'm excited to see what they can do moving forward. So it's an excellent first showing for a very promising series. So I cannot wait to see what they have in Chapter 2 and onward, Nightmare Cart. Not technically a horror game, but it's horror adjacent enough that I think it deserves to be talked about. For anyone who doesn't know, there's a developer. I don't know what her actual name or like developer name is. I just know that on Twitter she goes by Bunlith, because I follow her on Twitter. But a developer was making a PS1 styled Bloodborne kart racer, essentially. And then like a week before it was to launch, Sony said, "Hey, cease and desist." And she was like, "Fuck." So it's now the rebranded and legally neutral Nightmare Cart, where it's still definitely Bloodborne, but it's legally distinct. It's such a treat to play. It's so well polished. It's such a fun concept to combine combat and racing in the way that they do. And as someone who loves kart racers, it's a very responsive kart racer, which always feels good to play. And the fact that it's, I'm pretty sure, free, it's so good. But yeah, I mean, you can count the FNAF demo because it's a demo. I'm not going to put it on here yet. And again, that's even less horror adjacent. But no, Nightmare Cart is a really fun time if you haven't played it yet. Speaking of other games that came out, Dreadweight. Dreadweight is indie horror, 100%, and it's a sequel to Cooking Companions. I feel like Dreadweight kind of flew under the radar as much as, in comparison to Cooking Companions. Because when Cooking Companions came out, you couldn't get away from it. Everyone was talking about it, I feel anyway. And I feel like people didn't talk about Dreadweight as much, and it's not for lack of quality. I really enjoyed Dreadweight when I played it. I maybe what it was, it released so close to Into the Pit that it got overshadowed. Maybe that was part of it. But like genuinely, Dreadweight was such an enjoyable experience for me. Loved the game. It gave me everything that I liked about Cooking Companions again. So I really like how it came out. And if you haven't played it, you really should. But I mean, speaking of, yes, it's a big name, but it's an indie game still. Into the Pit. Do I have to say anything? Like last week's podcast was all about Into the Pit because it's that good. It was so many. I feel like it, not to the extent of Security Breach, but similarly to Security Breach, introduced a lot of people to the franchise, where like a lot of people who like never really enjoyed FNAF's gameplay went, "Oh, this looks fun," and played that, which is great. What else? Oh, duh. Amanda the Adventurer 2. Amanda the Adventurer 2 came out like a week ago, as of recording, half a week ago. Amazing. Like there's only so many words I can use to describe how good the indie horror that came out this year is, and I'm running out of them. But Amanda the Adventurer 2 took everything I liked about the first game and did it again. in a very fun and compelling way. I think like part of me liked the escape room feeling that the first one gave, since all the puzzle pieces were always available, whereas like 2 would present new ones a lot. But that I wouldn't say either was like better or worse of a method. It's just different. But genuinely really good puzzles. I will say, if you're watching this, Mangled Maw Games, I believe. If you're watching this, the first book puzzle, I still don't understand it. Because like, and I'm going to hop on my soapbox real quick. Because everyone in my chat was wrong. And everyone in chat who was like, oh, you're dumb, it's this. No, you're wrong. I promise you. So the puzzles is that you get 4 books, or 5 books with hints. 3 of the books have an initial and a number. One of the books says that 3 is the last number. And one of the books says JP is the first initial. So with that, it's like, okay, well, we can scan these books. We can see the names. But the thing that kept confusing me was the first number of this sequence was 5, and JP was the first initial. But 5, the number, is on the page with the initials MA. So the number and the initials being on the same page means nothing. It's like, okay, I can accept that. But then why is it that JP is 5 when JP had nothing to do, like the date didn't have anything to do with 5? Unless, now that I think about it, was it supposed to be that like JP, his like first book he rented out was the book with a 5 in it? Maybe that's what it's supposed. It's unclear. I think it was just a little too vague. Where like the other puzzle we did with the books at the end, where it was 1 + 2 = MD, that was understandable. It was hard, but not impossible, and like it made sense. Whereas I still don't think that first puzzle makes sense, and maybe that's just me. But I got really worried when that was the first puzzle. I was like, oh God, is the whole game going to be like this? It took me 45 minutes and I just brute forced it. Like by the time we got to the end of 45 minutes, I was like, okay, you know, we have all 4 of the numbers. I'm just going to brute force it. And for your first puzzle, that's a rough start. But you know, other than that, wonderful game. And I do highly recommend everyone play it. I mean, hell, it was the first non-FNAF video I've made since February. So I think that says something. And that's just new indie horror games that I've played. There's indie horror games that have come out recently I haven't even gotten to play yet because I booked so many collabs in October. Perfect example, Finding Frankie. I really want to play Finding Frankie. It looks so fun. And everyone I know who's played it is like, damn, it's so fun. The Mirror's Edge was one of my favorite PS3 games. And the fact that you made a parkour indie horror game, I'm in. I'm so in. I want to play it so bad. But I'm not going to be able to play it until like the second week of November. But we will, mark my words, be playing Finding Frankie. Mouthwashing. Everyone I know who's played Mouthwashing is like, oh, this is good. And I haven't even seen anything from Mouthwashing yet. I didn't even know it existed until I saw like Fizz playing it a week ago. And even then I was like, oh, well, that looks cool. I don't want to spoil it, so I won't watch that stream. But then everyone like Sin is like, oh yeah, this is amazing. Like people love Mouthwashing. I want to know what it's about, but I want to play it for myself. Eventually we'll play it on stream. We just got the Yarnaby trailer, you know, for Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. Yarnaby looks sick. I'm excited to see what Poppy Playtime Chapter 4 has for us. Granted, that's January next year, but it's close. All this to say, 2024 indie horror and mascot horror is alive and thriving. There's so many new and interesting concepts that we have not seen before that are done so especially well. And I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. Because I know a lot of people are kind of getting mascot horrored out. And a lot of people were saying that it started to become a very repetitive genre. And frankly, I disagree. I think, yes, you can look and seek out the low effort mascot horror that can sometimes be released, but it doesn't take a lot to find the really good stuff that's coming out. So I really think we're in a great spot, and I can't wait to see what else comes out. especially for the rest of this year and next year. But moving on to questions, if you have your questions, you can send them in to Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description, copy and paste because it's a pain to type out. Our first question comes from Paul, and I'm going to read out the whole thing because it made me laugh. Dearest Rai Toastifer, I listened to your podcast episode where you discussed whether or not the Security Breach era characters are possessed or not with Heidi's fantasy, and was wondering what your thoughts were on Glamrock Bonnie. Do you think he's possessed? And if not, what is the deal with all of the wet floorbots? Sincerely, Paul, he, him. Thank you for your question. That's a good one. I think similar to Glamrock Freddy, Glamrock Bonnie also feels like one of the ones who might be possessed, but I'm still against it. At least with the evidence we have. From what we know of, from what the game presents us with Bonnie and Freddy and all that, to me, it kind of feels like Bonnie did what Bonnie tried to do what Freddy did. To me, with what we have in front of us, we don't have a lot, admittedly, but it feels like Bonnie was taken out for a reason. Don't mind me, I'm just gonna be shampooing Mark on the side because he wants attention. And we have a dry cat shampoo that you can just massage it and leave. And you don't have to... Okay, so, like, cats self-clean pretty good. So if you just take them to the groomers, like, a couple times a year, most cats are fine. All of our cats are lazy and don't clean themselves. So we need to shampoo these cats. And so they get washed pretty frequently because otherwise he just starts getting stinky. And I'm like, my guy... I love you. Why don't you clean yourself? But you just massage it in and brush it out. And then you brush it out. ADHD is going crazy tonight. But from what we know, like, Freddy was taken out, Bonnie was taken out, likely by Monty, my guess, under the direction of Fanny or Glitch Trap. So the question then becomes like, okay, why was Bonnie taken out? Now, it is possible that it was just the first side effect of Monty getting too aggressive. That's totally possible. But it feels too important to just be a side effect, right? Like, the game places a lot of emphasis on the mystery of what happened to Bonnie. And part of me wondered for a time, and this was before Help Wanted 2, if Bonnie is to Cassie's dad as Freddy was to Gregory, where, like, Cassie's dad is trying to fix what's going on and uses Bonnie to figure that out, gets found out, Bonnie gets destroyed. It's technically still possible, but I feel like Help Wanted 2 goes against that. But to me, Bonnie feels a lot like a failed version of what Freddy does. So when I think of, like, is Bonnie possessed, I tend to think no, but rather he has gained sentience and was put down because of it. He failed where Glamrock Freddy didn't. As far as the wet floorbots go, I got no clue, and I've made no pretenses to pretend like I do have a clue what the deal with the wet floorbots is. I've got a couple guesses. One of them, I made a video on it like last year. Mark, if you want to be brushed, you gotta let me brush you. One of the guesses that I think is compelling, for the all-staff meeting where we believe it happened, there's a bunch of turned over chairs, and if you count all the chairs for where the all-staff meeting probably took place, it adds up to the same number of wet floorbots we have in Ruin. So I'm like, maybe that's like a pretty big coincidence. So maybe the wet floorbots are people, but then that also feels weird because, like, why are they possessing wet floorbots? What's the purpose there? But then again, the wet floorbots seem to be connected to Bonnie. So is it that Glamrock Bonnie is still functional and trying to reach out to anybody to warn about what he's learned and he manages to reach out to wet floorbots? Is that possible? Maybe. But we don't have a lot of information. It is notable that the wet floorbots make like a crying, screaming, and pain noise whenever you're wearing the mask around them. And that's notable. But again, it's notable, but we don't have a specific reason why, which is bothersome. But you're right to call out Glamrock Bonnie and the wet floorbots. I would say similar to Freddy, similar to Glitch Trap, if anything in these stories are possessed, it's characters like that, who are exceptionally strange in a way we don't immediately know why. But On the face of it, I'm against it, only because we don't have a lot of evidence to say that he is. We just have evidence saying that he's weird. Thank you for your question. And also, don't call me Toastifer. Our next question comes from Rio, she, they. Do you think it's possible we could see Michael or any of the other bullies as younger kids in The Secret of the Mimic? Realistically, it takes place only 4 years before Dave's death, which means they would be alive. I get that there wouldn't be much sense to the plot itself, but I could see Steelwool adding it as an Easter egg or something like that. Thank you for your question. So, this is going out next week, which means that you've already seen my Bonnie bully, or my FNAF 4 bully theory, which does posit like the next bully we're going to meet is the Chica bully. If that is true, it would be very interesting if, like, instead of what karma gets them later in life, we kind of get a setup early of like, oh, by the way, this person is the Chica bully. And maybe that points to one of the characters in the books who dies. And like, maybe that's how that connects. But as far as I'm aware, that wouldn't make sense. Cause like you mentioned, this is before 1983. I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be really pleasantly surprised, but I wouldn't be like, that's impossible for a FNAF 4 bully reference to happen. I mean, again, like you said, we're only 4 years before it happened, so they're all alive and they're all still teenagers probably, or like older kids. So it's definitely, man, I got so much cat fur from doing that in the air and now it's going on my nose. It's definitely possible. I think it's less likely than a William or Henry Easter egg or reference. I think those are really what people are going to be looking for and hoping for. But I wouldn't say a FNAF 4 bully reference is out of the question. But I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I'm really excited. I hope we get like a meaningful trailer soon. Not to say like it's coming out next year, so it's not like we need it now or whatever. But it would be nice just to have a better idea on what this game actually is besides just a face. But, you know, it comes out next year, so we've got time. But thank you for your question, Rio. Next one comes from Bolt Indy, he, him. Have you noticed the trend of people who are very confident about certain pieces of information in FNAF as if they're explicit fact? I wanted to know your perspective on it and how people should handle or navigate different levels of confidence in regards to theorizing and speculating with evidence, such as being underconfident, confident, and even overconfident from both a theorist perspective and a fan perspective. Yeah, thank you for that insight, Bolt Indy. And yeah, so I will say, we see it a lot in the FNAF space because if the FNAF space is very theory focused, but pretty much any fandom where speculation and theory comes into play, you're going to encounter this. The idea of people taking theories and hypotheses as fact. And then also people's taking actual literal fact and assuming it's a theory and downplaying it. The issue, it's hard to just diagnose because like I'm also guilty of this to an extent. Where I know, like, I've gotten called out in the past that, like, my titles are often overzealous and overconfident, but they're titles. They kind of have to be for YouTube's algorithm. I try my best to make sure that, like, in a video I'm stating, like, I believe that. It seems that, you know, like, that lead-in. I think part of it, honestly, is Twitter. And not, like, Twitter's fan base is exceptionally toxic or whatever. Twitter as a site has some issues. One of the issues is a limited word count. So I genuinely think like the vast majority of people who are stating things as fact are just trying to get their point across and don't want to waste what little character count they have by adding, in my opinion, before every sentence. That being said, there definitely are FNAF fans who will take a theory and run it as fact, or will see something in the games and disregard it as speculation, you know, and here's my honest advice. If you see someone interacting like this and they're being if they're not being aggressive with it, you know, and you want to engage with that kind of a person, sure. You know, like if someone's like, oh yeah, this is a fact, and they seem super pleasant and you want to be like, hey, by the way, you know, this is actually a theory. I mean, yeah, do whatever. But if someone's rule of thumb, if you're on the internet and someone's being mean or aggressive, just don't engage. Like it's so much easier to just ignore. You're not going to solve a problem or make something better or change someone's mind by trying to shout louder than someone who's already shouting, you know? People who want their minds changed and are open to it approach with that mindset. People who are not open to having their minds changed don't. So I would say if you are trying to talk about like theories or anything online and someone's being aggressive or dismissive, you don't have to engage, right? Not every battle needs to be fought. Not everything's a battle. It's not that deep. It's most of the time social media. And like, I think at the end of the day, social media should exist to entertain and delight. So if you're on social media and you're doing something that makes you angry, log off. Go do something else. And like, especially if it comes down to fandom culture. Like politics, that's one thing. You know, this goes out. When is this coming out? Oh my God, this comes out on the 5th. Hey, okay, fuck everything. Big thing. I have made it no mistake and I've made it no secret that I'm very political. Today is election day in the US. I didn't realize as of recording until right now. It's going to be super real. She's not perfect. I have a lot of problems with a lot of her policies. Vote for Kamala Harris. If you live in the US and you're voting age, vote for Kamala Harris. If you want some more information, there are plenty of people who are much smarter than me with much more in-depth videos than me. I recommend if you're on the fence and you're not sure and you want a moderate take, someone like Legal Eagle might help you there. If you want someone who gives you a more in-depth take, I highly recommend Adam Conover's YouTube channel. I also highly recommend someone like Leeja Miller, Leeja Miller. If you're really on the fence somehow, go watch those videos. All I can tell you is, and even if you're one of those people who are like, oh, I only care about the economy, I don't care about social stuff or how he is as a person, he's bad on economy too. Like straight up. His plan changes by the day, and everything he's proposed will economically ruin this country. So even if you don't care about the human lives that he's going to forever ruin, if you just care about the economy, he's shit there too. So I promise you, it's in everyone's best interest for you to at least not vote for Trump. And I know you're technically supposed to, like, you know, as a YouTuber, I'm supposed to be like, oh, vote for who you believe in. No, I'm not doing that. As many problems as I have with Kamala's campaign, because I'm much further left than she is, I assure you, her plan is at least a plan, and it does not involve the essentially takeover that the people behind Trump have been planning. Because, and realistically, I'm gonna get real for a second. If you're gonna make some of you uncomfortable, the problem isn't just Trump. It never has been, it never will be. Even if Trump loses, you know, and loses by a lot, and they don't manage to weasel their way through. There is a rot in the Republican Party right now. If every election you lose, you claim cheating. And every election you win, you smear. I don't know what needs to be done. I don't know what can be done. But something does need to be done. Being a leftist in America sucks. Because your two major political parties are a group of demons and some limp-wristed 80-year-olds who don't care enough to stop them. So, hopefully enough of those 80-year-olds age out soon. But yeah, if you care for LGBT rights, women's rights, human lives, especially those of the Palestinians. I mean, Trump literally 2 days ago, as of recording this, was talking about how he frequently calls Netanyahu directly. What do you think he's going to do in office? It's not going to be good. Like, yeah, the Democrats are enabling this behavior of Israel as much as anybody else. But Trump will make it a lot worse, I promise you. That is not to say that if and when Kamala Harris and the Democrats win the office, we just fucking sit up and be like, oh, yeah, cool, we don't have to pay attention anymore. No. I fully and strongly believe the correct thing as an American citizen to do right now is to vote in Kamala Harris and protest her office every single goddamn day until there is a ceasefire enforced between Israel and Palestine, the Palestinians are able to actualize and have safety for once, and a whole lot of other things too. But a vote for does not mean I like. All right? Vote for Kamala Harris. And then once she's in, protest her every single goddamn day. Anyway, I know a lot of people like to use this channel to kind of tune out, but today is too important. It really is. What were we talking about? Five Nights at Freddy's, I think. Oh yeah, online. If it's fandom culture, just fucking block people. Just block button's free. Thank you for your question, Bolt Indy. Yeah. Our next question comes from Monster, they, them. If FNAF is an in-universe, we're just gonna end the podcast there. Monster, I'll answer your question next time. I can't just go back to FNAF after talking about that. If you have your questions you want to talk on the podcast, send them into Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast at gmail.com. It's in the description of copy and paste because it's pain to type out. But until next time, it's been apparently a FNAF podcast, the pizza abilities or whatever. Later.